Brief history of Cold War. The Cold War was one of the most intense and dangerous periods in modern history. It was not a traditional war with direct battles between armies, but a long-lasting conflict of power, ideology, and influence between two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. This global tension lasted for nearly 45 years, from 1947 to 1991, and shaped the world we live in today. To understand the Cold War, we must go back to the end of World War II in 1945. The world had just witnessed massive destruction, especially after the defeat of Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany. While the United States and the Soviet Union had been allies during the war, their relationship quickly began to break down afterward. The reason was simple but powerful: ideology. The United States believed in capitalism and democracy, where people had freedom to choose their leaders and run businesses. On the other hand, the Soviet Union followed communism, where the government controlled most aspects of life and aimed for equality among citizens. These opposing beliefs created deep suspicion and fear. The Cold War officially began around 1947, when both nations started trying to expand their influence across the globe. The United States introduced the Truman Doctrine, promising to support countries threatened by communism. At the same time, the Soviet Union worked to spread its ideology, especially in Eastern Europe. One of the first major conflicts of the Cold War was the Berlin blockade. Germany had been divided into East and West, and Berlin, its capital, was also split. The Soviet Union blocked all land routes to West Berlin, hoping to force the Western powers out. In response, the United States and its allies launched the Berlin Airlift, delivering food and supplies by air for almost a year. This event showed how far both sides were willing to go without direct war. As tensions grew, both sides formed powerful military alliances. The United States and its allies created NATO in 1949, while the Soviet Union responded with the Warsaw Pact in 1955. Europe was now clearly divided into two camps, increasing the risk of global conflict. Another major feature of the Cold War was the arms race. Both the United States and the Soviet Union competed to build more powerful weapons, especially nuclear bombs. This created a situation known as mutually assured destruction, meaning that if one side launched a nuclear attack, both sides would be destroyed. The fear of nuclear war kept the world on edge for decades. The Cold War was not limited to Europe. It spread across the world through proxy wars, conflicts where the superpowers supported different sides without directly fighting each other. One of the earliest examples was the Korean War, where North Korea, backed by the Soviet Union and China, fought against South Korea, supported by the United States and its allies. The war ended in a stalemate, but Korea remains divided even today. Another major conflict was the Vietnam War. The United States supported South Vietnam to prevent the spread of communism, while the Soviet Union and China backed North Vietnam. After years of intense fighting, the United States withdrew, and Vietnam was unified under communist rule. Perhaps the most dangerous moment of the Cold War came in 1962, during the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Soviet Union placed nuclear missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles away from the United States. When the U.S. discovered this, tensions escalated rapidly. For 13 days, the world stood on the brink of nuclear war. Fortunately, both sides reached an agreement, and the missiles were removed, avoiding disaster. The Cold War was not only about war and politics, it was also a race for technological and scientific superiority. This was known as the space race. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the first artificial satellite. However, tensions rose again in the late 1970s and early 1980s, especially after the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. The United States responded by supporting Afghan fighters, turning it into another proxy conflict. The final chapter of the Cold War began in the mid-1980s, with the rise of Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev. He introduced major reforms like glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring to improve the Soviet system. At the same time, he worked to reduce tensions with U.S. President Ronald Reagan. These changes led to historic agreements to reduce nuclear weapons and improve relations. In 1989, one of the most powerful symbols of the Cold War, the Berlin Wall, was torn down, signaling the collapse of communist control in Eastern Europe. Finally, in 1991, the Soviet Union officially dissolved into independent countries, marking the end of the Cold War. The United States emerged as the world's only superpower, and a new global order began. In conclusion, the Cold War was a battle of ideas, power, and influence that lasted for nearly half a century. Although it never turned into a direct war between the two superpowers, its impact was felt across the globe through conflicts, alliances, and technological advancements. The lessons of the Cold War still shape international relations today, reminding us of the importance of diplomacy and the dangers of division. If you found this video informative, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to History of World for more powerful content.